Welcome to Conversations with Big Rich. This is an interview-style podcast. These interviewed are all involved in the off-road industry. Being involved, like all of my guests are, is a lifestyle, not just a job. I talk to past, present, and future legends, as well as business owners, employees, media, and land use warriors. Men and women who have found their way into this exciting and addictive lifestyle we call off-road. We discuss their personal history, struggles, successes, and reboots. We dive into what drives them to stay active in off-road. We all hope to shed some light on how to find a path into this world that we live and love and call off-road. This episode of Conversations with Big Rich is brought to you by the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. The mission of the Hall of Fame is to educate and inspire present and future generations of the off-road community by celebrating the achievements of those who came before. We invite you to help fulfill the mission of the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. Join, partner, or donate today. Legends live at ormhoff.org. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Marty Fiolka. Marty is an accomplished writer, magazine editor, marketing professional, movie producer, off-road racer, and a 2014 inductee into the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. Marty, thank you very much for agreeing to spend some time with us and talk about your history.
It's a pleasure, Rich, and I'm looking forward to this chat. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about all things off-road racing and what we're involved with.
Exactly. So let's start at the very beginning, and let's tell the listeners where you were born and raised.
Okay, yeah, I was born actually in Toronto, Canada. My parents were both. My dad was a German immigrant, and my mom was an Austrian immigrant, and they met there. And I was born there. And when I was a year old, my father and mom took me cross country to Los Angeles in a Porsche 356 with a little trailer on it, and I was basically raised in Northern California, just south of San Francisco for my whole life through high school.
Okay, just south of San Francisco. Now you're talking my neighborhood. I grew up in San Bruno, California. Where were you?
Pacifica.
Oh,
So I grew up literally right over the hill from you.
Yeah, I lived there for a number of years as well, over in the Lindenmar area.
Yep. No, I'll surf there quite a bit when I was a teenager. So that was my stomping grounds too.
All right. That's awesome. So then going from Canada to California and the coast, like you said, you got into surfing. That area that we're talking about, Pacifica, it's part of the metropolitan San Francisco Bay Area, but it's small, especially, from our age. And when you got there, it was pretty small. What was it like growing up there?
It was before the time of obviously all the e-commerce, the Silicon Valley. That wasn't there. And I felt very fortunate to grow up in a place where we were right on the coast, and you could go south and go to Santa Cruz. There was some off-roading going on up there. There was surfing obviously going on, and San Francisco was just a pristine city to grow up. I can't imagine a better childhood. I really loved it, and it was, like I said, it was still beautiful, and there were beautiful places to live, but it was not like it is today. But you can still go down from Pacifica, go through Half Moon Bay past Mavericks, and there's still a lot of that wonderful farmland and to the ocean all the way to Santa Cruz. But it was about surfing and Volkswagens. That's what it was about. So
exactly.
That's the culture I grew up in.
So what year Volkswagen did you have?
Well, my dad actually worked for Robert Bosch for Bosch Spark Plugs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we were immediately ingrained in European cars. My first race I went to was a 1971 Can-Am race at Laguna Seca, which was kind of was the first real seed of, oh my God, motorsports is so cool, and I got to meet the drivers, and he knew a lot of the Porsche guys. So I started building my first Baja bug when I was, I think, 15. So I could have in time to have my driver's permit, and got into that part of it, and started working for a guy who was racing in Vora, and got exposed a little bit to the off-road races. Had races up in Sacramento, and my favorite was Virginia City when we raced up there, and eventually got to drive a little bit, but then reverted back to, building California look street cars too. I had one of those. So I was all about, hands-on building stuff. And like I said, the Volkswagen platform was awesome for somebody like me.
Well, I'm surprised we never crossed paths. Growing up in San Bruno, we spent a lot of time in Pacifica and on the coast. I had a 54 Volkswagen Street Bug. And then after that, after college, in fact, in the early 2000s, I owned Vora after Ed Robinson.
Right.
And,
oh, yeah.
And ran that for 4 years.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. I mean, because for then, I didn't really know much about anything south of where I was. I spent a lot of time with my family going down to Santa Barbara, but we never went to Baja. We never went to San Diego. We didn't go off-roading in that traditional family sense. I kind of did it on my own. And, but it was a great hybrid, and Vora was a kind of a great place to start. But obviously it was not big time off-road racing, because a lot of the cars were older. We were getting all the cars that were being purchased from down south and bringing them north. And I was still racing. I think I was still racing with a guy who had a Funko Wampus Ski racing still. So we were doing all that and high jumpers and those kind of cars. And it wasn't until later when I went to my first score race down at Mojave Desert when I saw the real cars and was like blown away by all of that too.
Wow. Okay. So you went to Terra Nova High School then?
I did. Class of 1980.
1980.
That's where I was. Yep. And okay. So, and went to College of San Mateo for junior college. And then, then I moved down to San Diego, had my Cal Look Bug with a surfboard, and moved down to be a DJ down in San Diego and Pacific Beach. And, worked at one of the first real truly nightclubs, there in San Diego. That was right at the start of MTV. So we were a fully digital nightclub with a huge satellite dish on the roof, and taking video cameras on the beach on the weekends. And it was a good time to be growing up, and spent a couple of years or a year in San Diego State, and then moved up to Cal State Long Beach to finish my degree in broadcasting and marketing.
Excellent. So you do have a degree in marketing and broadcasting. Excellent.
I do, yeah. Bill May, yeah. I was studying more TV production then, but the marketing thing was always kind of there, and and it didn't necessarily translate right at first. Right out of college, I got offered a job at Bosch as a field rep, and got a job following my dad's footsteps in a sense, and was basically going through the West Coast, going to at that time there were a lot of German repair facilities and European auto parts places, and making sure they had catalogs and taking care of warranties, and but then that evolved fairly quickly in 1988 to a job at Bosch, where I was moved back down to Southern California and was doing aftermarket or OEM aftermarket light projects for like Toyota, Nissan. Back in those days, like the Nissan, like the 4Runner or the pre-runners that they were building at the time had Bosch lights, so that was all dealer or port installed options. And it was all with all the OEMs were doing it. So that eventually somebody found out I was an off-road guy, and I went to literally the Mint 400 with a backpack full of Bosch stickers, and kind of met Bob Ritchie from the RCR plumbing team, and Bob Gordon, and a couple other guys. Say, hey, look, here's some lights, here's some decals. You win some races, and I'll get you some money. We'll come up with some kind of contingency program. And that evolved very quickly to kind of managing the off-road program at Bosch, when we created a program with Yokohama Tire and Toyota, where we had a 5-car team, and we were sponsoring all the big truck teams because Bosch wanted to have OEM sales. So we were sponsoring Robbie Gordon, Jim Venable's team. We were on the Scoop Vessel Chevrolet program. I think we were on the Rough Riders too. Sponsored Mickey Thompson series, and that was when I was really young. I think it was only 25, 26 years old, and I was doing all that type of thing.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was great. I was just enamored with that era. It was still, I consider one of the golden eras of the sport, but that's when all the factory Class 8s were there. And then I was still kind of a Class 1, Class 2 guy. I loved the Porsche powered Chinooks and the race codes, and rode with Bob Ritchie a couple races, rode with Bob Gordon a couple races, and just really enjoyed that era of off-road motorsports. And it was big time, and even sponsoring the Mickey Thompson series. Bosch was there for a couple of years, and really enjoyed that. That was really my kind of more my wheelhouse.
So Bosch was really your first foray into the job-wise into the off-road market.
Yeah, it was. And I was, like I said, I was just fortunate basically be involved with all the best teams and all the best guys at the time. And honestly, the Yokohama Bosch Toyota team was the very first super team that the sport had. It was before the Rough Riders. And what we did is we took a car, a Class 1 car, a Class 2 car, a Class 10 car, and then a 7S and a 7 4x4. And these were independent teams, and we put them all under one umbrella and ran that for a couple of years. And I kind of brought Toyota and Yokohama together with Bosch, and we kind of did it that way. And it was a successful program on the racetrack. Maybe not. We won some races, but it was more as a marketing tool to see everybody together in tech, or go down tech and contingency at the Mint. I mean, it was a big deal. Like I said, it lasted a couple of years, and that was really where I started understanding more OEM. The side of things, and understanding a bit more marketing, and starting to work with the media and the ESPN, and that's where kind of all that started.
So running into Bosch and going down to that first Mint 400, were you familiar with those teams that you were trying to work with, or were you just like being a cold calling salesman with a backpack and stickers?
That's what I was. Absolutely. I literally had I have a picture of myself next to the RCR car, and you can see I've got have a Bosch shirt on and some OP shorts, and I'm sitting there with my center parted hair and a mustache, and but that's how it started. And I was fortunate. I think Bob Ritchie won the class or something. So there's a Dusty Times picture where you see him with a Bosch light on it, and that's what I sent back to Wolfgang Hustad, who was the head of Bosch Motorsports at the time, and of all Bosch Motorsports, including IndyCar. And it just kind of triggered something, and we eventually set up, and we were working with distributors, and it was kind of a booming market back then. But it was really all based on getting OEM aftermarket sales, and we were able to sponsor teams. I was sponsoring. I had everybody pretty much. We had Nissan team, we had Dave Weston and GMC. So we didn't have Toyota. We never got to Cal, but everybody else we did for a couple of years there, and still have made lifelong friends and people I still deal with today.
Right. That's pretty awesome. You having the, I know that they said to you and said, hey kid, take this backpack, take these lights, take these stickers, and go get us some racers. And to just walking up into the pits and going, hey, I'm Marty and I want you to run our lights. That's kind of the way it went, right?
Yeah. And, at the time I was also, look, I didn't just work for some random company. I mean,
no, Bosch is big.
Bosch is Bosch. So, we were involved with, and it was also lights and providing, the racing spark plugs. All those guys had those expensive silver plugs that were using the 911 motors at the time. And, you needed 12 of those every time. So they were happy with it. And yeah, but I just automatically felt with certain teams, I wanted the best guys. And I just kind of knew obviously Bob was something special, and Bob Ritchie had the best looking car I thought of all. And, we just were very fortunate, and then I got to work a little bit more with Frank D'Angelo on the BF Goodrich side. And by 1989, I had met one of my best friends walking to his glass shop, and we decided we were going to go racing. So we bought a 1/2/1600 car, and that we still have now. We bought back for Nora, and that's kind of where my racing side started for that. I was, it was all kind of coming together at the same time in my life. I had done some work for Mitsubishi's public relations agency. I went to work for the largest PR agency in the United States at the time, kind of learned that craft with some media things, and then parlayed that into a job. I was 30 at the time, so it was 1992, and I got a job at the Russell Racing School in Monterey at Laguna Seca, and I was the director of marketing and sales there. So I moved to Monterey and lived there for a couple of years, and that opened myself to a whole other group of people. We were working at the time with Al Unser and Rick and Roger Mears, and then Casey Mears was going through our school. So I kind of got exposed to all of that then too.
That's incredible. That's a hell of a ladder. Or, I don't know if you call it a ladder or not, but it's more,
my life has been more of maybe a slightly horizontal ladder.
Right.
It never was really created to I'm just one of those people that where I just happen to find great experiences and work hard on products, and it kind of led to other things. But I also learned, Rich, that you have to, you can't pigeonhole your skill set too much, because I loved motorsports, and I knew that was always the key. But I also was working, with OEMs at the time, and then opening myself up to more things on the motorsport side other than just the off-road side. I love that because I love doing it, and I love racing in it, and racing the score races we did there in 90, 91, and eventually racing the Baja 1000 in 92. That was my passion. But I always felt like if I was going to do this, that I always in my heart felt like the credibility, and that lasts all the way through my career now. It's like I have to do it still. I can't just be outside of it. I feel like I want to build cars. I want to go race. We still do, and that was, we can talk about later about the real secret sauce behind the dirt sports years too. It was inclusion because we did it, and
Right.
an understanding because we did it, and because we built it. And that was, whenever you go into a circle of people, if I was at the best off-road race in the world? No. Successful reasonably, but it brought me a lot of credibility, and also, stopped this itch that I had to go racing, which I still do.
That's cool. I had an itch to go racing myself, and I kept putting it off, and now I think a friend and I are gonna try the Nora, but I don't. I told him when we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, I said, okay, if we do this, I want to do it for fun. I mean, if we do well, great, but I want to do it for fun. I don't want to go down there and just make it, all about trying to get a win. And it's that's a big change for me, because I'm
Yeah,
like hyper competitive, and it's one reason I don't play board games or anything, is because I'm hyper competitive. I'm a poor loser, and I'm a worse winner.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm that the same way. We like I said, we raced, and then all my teammates here in Long Beach, I still race with that same group, and we were able to go by when Nora came about, and that was in 2010. I fully locked into that concept, and I locked in the concept of the vintage side, obviously, getting off-road race cars out of shops because there's a reason to use them then. And that was, I thought, super cool. I thought the format was super cool. And I had, right by that time, and that was in 2010, I had already done 15 Baja 1000s, and I don't know how many Baja 500s. I mean, via wide open and all the other things I was involved with. But the Nora thing was just back to having fun again. Because when you're at a certain age and a certain, we never kind of raised ourselves up to some high level of sponsorship or money. The pre-running and the race fuel and the overnights and the hotels and the concern about safety become kind of a overwhelming thought process. And so the idea of, wait, we can go down and go race once a year for 5 days, get it out of our system, show up with the best looking race cars we can that are prepped with all the good stuff that we can go be competitive, and kind of build a team around that, which we have now. That's where it all started, and there are a lot of people who've done it, and now we're doing the same thing. It's a wonderful advent to the sport. I gotta tell you, Nora has saved a lot of people, their racing quote unquote careers or their hobbies, and being able to allow people to do it again in a way that's really fun. It's fun seeing the vibe. It's fun. It's totally different than any other race you've been to. The vibe is fun. It's like a rolling party. It's a rolling pre-run. But yeah, you're racing, but you're also taking pieces of history and bringing them out, like the big Ole Bronco last year, or a friend of mine's got 2 Porsche 911s that he's preparing and racing. So sedans. I mean, it's all of that. So it's a really, really good experience. You're gonna enjoy it.
Cool. Let's talk about that time frame, or that ladder. You were with Bosch Yokohama.
Yep.
And then what happened after that? I mean, when did that transition? Did you go right into the Ren sports?
Yeah. So what happened was, what happened was, is after the Russell Racing School, I went back to an agency. Again, I was never really an agency employee. I didn't understand the pricing structures that they were charging. I just didn't fit in the corporate. I mean, it took me a while to figure it out. I tried, just never quite fit in. I just was too self-starting, or just didn't understand endless meetings or 500 emails about something you can discuss in 2 minutes and get done.
Right.
So that's just kind of my MO. And now in my later years, I've kind of realized it and accepted it. It's like, that's just not for me. But so I was fortunate enough, though, to get an opportunity to do public relations for Frank Hansowitz, who ran Nissan Motorsports. And, right away we were involved with sports car racing at the time, at the very end of the 300CX program, 1995, with Steve Millen and Johnny O'Connell. And of course, that opened me up to just yet a whole other group of people, high level, we were winning sports car races at the time, and, going to places like Daytona and Sebring and all those places. And then that program ended, and then we transitioned into, getting ready to go IndyCar racing with IRL. So we, through the Infinity Indy project. So I was there as a consultant, but I opened up kind of an agency under my racing was always Team Rennsport. So, and then, my agency was the Rennsport Group. Rennsport's German for motorsports, and it just kind of worked for me. And, we still are under that same, the team is still on Team Rennsport, and the agency still the Rennsport Group. And so it was I was always more virtual with one, had a couple employees at one time, but mostly just getting, freelance people to come in. But during that time, Nissan still was actively involved in short course racing with Art Schmidt. And I remember taking the motorsports writer from Road and Track at the time, a guy named Andy Bornhoff, and I, along with my photographer, Boyd Janes, and we went to our first Crandon race. I think it was 1998. And we're just, again, blown away by that event. That's a whole other conversation. But it was, so I always kept kind of my motorsports thing, off-road motorsports thing going, Rich. And that was, weather was intended. I was still racing at the time, and honestly, the IRL thing was awesome because it introduced me to IndyCar drivers. And I worked with a bunch of them, Roberto Guerrero, Mike Roth, Lynn St. James was one of our drivers, so these relationships I had. And then in 98, I had a chance through Pennzoil to get a 2-car team together for the Baja 1000 with Scott Steinberger. So we had a Pennzoil Class 12 car, and Scott had his pro truck, and I brought Mike Roth down for that. And, and he loved that experience so much that, they started talking to his brother. And at that time, I also then was roommates with Todd Clement. And Todd and I basically started Wide Open in our townhouse, and eventually that led to those guys being part of the first, Wide Open races in 2000.
Cool. So that's the next thing on my list here of things I wanted to hit was the Wide Open Baja Adventures.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that? I mean, you guys were roommates. How did that all come about? Was it just had an epiphany?
Basically there was. So at the time, unlike today with Raptors and side-by-sides, there was no easy portal to the sport. And I'm talking I'm talking something that's not, something like Moab with Jeeps and rock crawling. I'm talking about high performance, fast off-road racing in the desert.
Right.
There was no way to experience that. And I had an old Raceco 1.2/1600 car that was like my pre-runner, and so did Todd. And we basically took a couple, I think Rich Minga had a car. Anyway, we basically took those and we were just going to allow people to take them and do tours, do the guided tours in those cars. And it was a difficult thing to do because, all the parts were different. And, I had the idea of renting out cars for the Baja 1000. I had that for years and years, because what we did at the Russell Racing School was basically a ladder program, and you could go racing with us. And it was like that made sense, but we can't do it here. So we started that like 98, 99. And then Todd was smart enough early on to basically have Bill Savage design the Wide Open Baja cars that were intended to be easily accessed. They had a completely different tube structure that allowed them to be super, reliable, and put lots and lots and lots of miles on them. We had an immediate sponsorship with Bill Stein and with Yokohama. And then we realized, this is a great corporate tour program, and people can finally come and do this. So it was we had a lot of public relations efforts through Men's Journal and just getting guys to come down and do this. And it blossomed into what eventually grew. In fact, it all started here about a half a mile from my house in San Juan Capistrano here in a little office and a little barn. And at that time Tommy Morris was working for us already, and we had this great group of people that came together. And boy, I never thought it would grow to what it did. And the first ride and drive event we had was of all things, which you look back on now like, what are you doing? But it was like going to war at the time. But it was the Baja 2000. It was the first time we released cars. And at that time, I was also working with Sal Fish at Score to do the 40th anniversary, the Baja 2000. We had the first time we brought all the history together in a press conference event at the Peterson Museum, which was in September of that year. And it turned out to be the biggest event that Peterson had ever had at that time. But it was bringing together all these old vintage cars nobody had seen before. Nobody ever gathered them in one place before. Like, history was forgotten. But again, one of the things I learned from being in Indianapolis so much was that these race facilities and these series all are going back to their history. They always go back to history. And off-road racing didn't do that at the time. There was no history that anybody could access, which was the motivation for writing the 1,000 Miles to Glory book too, which all started around the same time, right in 2000. But that first 2,000 mile trip, there's more stories about that that I can included, even hitting a bull in the middle of the night one night and with me and totaling a car, and it took 4 days or 5 days to get to Cabo. It was, I was in bed for 2 weeks after that was over. It was a logistic. We didn't have the infrastructure at the time. We didn't have the horsepower ranch to base out of at that time. We just didn't. We had a lot of people do it. We had a lot of IndyCar guys come down and do it, and some journalists. It was great that right way. But eventually, years later, one year I think at White Oak we had 18 cars in the Baja 1000, and all 18 finished on time in La Paz. So by that time we had gotten kind of this system down much better.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That's quite an accomplishment to get 18 cars. So you guys basically had the first spec class?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't look back on history, but we did, but it was more catered to people coming, and we worked a lot. And Todd is really more responsible than I, but he was this dreamer who would come up with this crazy stuff. But the ranch was a great hospitality tool. And then when you went to the Baja 1000, we were flying guys into special places and setting up camps for them. It was it wasn't just come and race. It was like, we're going to do this in the right style. And we had a lot of corporate guys, a lot of upper end businessmen just coming down and doing this. And this is we never really, unfortunately, graduated the system like we should have, which was always a concern. I was like, why are we getting all these great people into the wide open system and not having other race cars or trophy trucks or whatever eventually they could step up to? We exposed the sport to a lot of people. And Baja we did. It was a big tool. Eventually BFG came in and really started using that tool for corporate hospitality training. And we were doing amazing tire testing because we were going up and down the peninsula every week or two and putting 1,000 miles on tires. So we were an R&D arm for BF Goodrich as well.
Very nice. I've not been to the Horsepower Ranch. Well, actually, I was there to drop off a part and left, but it's one of the places I do want to visit. I did not realize that that kind of history. So that was you and Todd that got Horsepower Ranch going as well as a base Todd, for you guys.
Yeah, so it was great because Todd, so when you first came to Wide Open Baja, you had to go. We had a little shop, but it was in Lower Ensenada, and I remember, it was next to like this stinky fish cannery place, and so here you have a high end tour, and you're picking people up at the airport in San Diego and bring them down, and that's the first thing they saw. We were staying at the time at Punta Mora, so it wasn't quite like that, but the first driving experience was in and out of traffic in Ensenada. It wasn't good. So Todd, bless him, found this 140-acre ranch, 6 miles out of Ensenada that was really, really, it's a beautiful place. And, but again, we had to promote it as like an off-road cultural hub, so that in 2003, we did our very first Baja Legacy Party, which was an extension of what I did in 2000. And we built our own Hall of Fame, quote unquote. And it was at the Baja 500 every year on the Thursday night. And eventually we had, I don't know, probably 800, 1,000, 1,200 people there, live music, again, history, historic cars there. And it brought people to the ranch, and we built out our cantina there. And now it's a fixture. When you go like Sonora, you need to go and see it, because it's a special place.
Right.
And it feels like you're in Baja. So even for our customers, we like at the top of the hill, it's down in a valley. We'd stop at the tour buses and say, okay, guys, your cell phones don't work after this hill. Shut them off. And as soon as they got down the hill and we're in front of the cantina there in our courtyard, the guys would be there with beers and shots of tequila. And that's how the wide open experience started. And it kind of was just a magical spot for that.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
To have that drive and ability to put it all together and, to create the wide open, and then also, the horsepower ranch on top of that is phenomenal. It's wow. Kudos. Going into then 2003 is when they shot Dust to Glory.
Yep. Yes, it was.
And you were an associate producer on Dust to Glory?
I was, yeah. I mean, it's hard to imagine it was 20 years ago now, but yeah, I was. I got approached by, I think it was kind of through Boyd Janes. He had gotten to know Mouse McCoy a little bit, and Scott Waugh, who was really the brains behind it, and Dana Brown. And, I remember the first meeting they had at my house. I was living up in Brentwood at the time and commuting down to San Juan Capistrano every day. But we sat there and we decided, you know what? We talked about this, they knew that they wanted to do this film. They wanted to make a cinematic film. But really, the inspiration as we sat around the table was, what we want to make is our version of Endless Summer or On Any Sunday. We
Right.
wanted something that was going to be just so powerful in storytelling and visual storytelling. And, and in a way that, Dana's father, Bruce Brown, had perfected with those two films. And Bruce was part of the group too. And, it's funny because I talked to Scott Waugh the other day about potentially having a reunion in 2025 and the 20th anniversary of the release. And, we feel now that we absolutely 100% accomplished that. The film still carries weight, still, it looks great, and it moved people to want to come to Baja. And I still meet people all the time. I said that movie makes me want to go do Nora. I was young and saw that film, and it had the same impact that Endless Summer and On Any Sunday did to me.
Bruce's On Any Sunday was the first off-road movie I'd seen, or first experience into off-road. Like I said, I was into bugs when I was a kid, but one of the guys from Bug Formance had, turned me on to the movie. And, he was older. I was, buying parts from him and stuff. And they, he had somehow he had it playing or showed it to me. I don't remember. Showed it a couple of us. And I was like, oh man, I got to go racing. Never did, but got into it, through the rock crawling. 2003, we were down there. I was working for one of the BFG pits with Jack Seipolt when Dust to Glory was being filmed. And we had a couple of the cameramen, or at least one of the cameramen, in our BFG pit. And I was really hoping we were going to get a chance to be in the movie. And when the movie finally came out, we got to see it, and I was like, damn, they didn't even show our pit. But
yeah,
it was still cool to be there.
Yeah, it was, compared to today, I mean, look, it was a technical, to go down and shoot a cinematic level film required. I mean, I think we had 75 cameras, because Baja's, the window is super short. And obviously we did pick up stuff later, we did shots later to fill it in. But we're going in, the game plan was always about, obviously, Mouse, on the solo deal, following Johnny Campbell. And then the McMillans were always part of that storyline, which, I kind of brought to the table. At the time, I brought the Mario Andretti storyline in too, because the Groff Class 1 car that's in there, the BFG Jimco, was one that I raced with the Groffs the year before. And so bringing Mario was something I had worked on. The girls' storyline with Wide Open, Class 11 was something I worked on. So those are kind of the storylines I had kind of brought together and worked on as well.
Nice. And what was the hardest part from your point of view of getting that movie out?
That's a good question, Rich. The hardest part was, not quite understanding the Hollywood system at that time, which I still don't quite understand. There was a lot of there was money. Everybody put in a lot of effort. I put in, 2 or 3 years of work on it, not full time, but there was a lot of effort put into creating what we did and then publicizing what we did later. But it was sold to a film company. I own, I don't know, 5 or 7% of the film. Never saw a dollar from it. The guy who was filming the movie in Mexico and putting it on a DVD and selling the street corner made more money than we all did. But it wasn't hard. I mean, again, so for me, knowing we were building something that was timeless and had quality and something that you could look at and be proud of overrides all of those things. And in the end of the day, how much did we move the needle in off-road racing? A lot, because
Definitely.
A lot of people saw it, and it turned a lot of people on, not just to Wide Open, but all kinds of things that made people want to go off-road or go off-road in Baja or race the Baja 1000. I think, like Sal had an amazing run at it. He owned part of it too, but his upside was he was getting lots of racers coming from all over the world because of that film. And I think, it was hard. Yeah, there was some hard times, but overall, you look back and say, it launched the career of Scott Waugh now, who's a major Hollywood director and producer, and helped my career. It helped us all at some level.
Right, and it really did. It's amazing. You can show that movie to somebody who has no idea what off-road racing is, because what. I know it's hard to fathom, but you travel all over the country. You see it. You go to places, and they may know what short course racing is because they're in that town. Say, like somebody that lives in Crandon or outside of Crandon. But you ask them what the Baja 1000 is, and they may not have any clue. And with that movie, it brought that into people's homes, or the possibility of them to actually see it. Beyond what was done with Wide World of Sports, at times.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And even a couple of years ago, I was doing an event, a private event for Polaris at Crandon. It was more of a market research deal. And the main gentleman from Polaris, who's younger, had dinner with me. And all of a sudden, he starts talking about, I said, how did you get in this role with Polaris? He says, well, I don't know, man, but I've been into racing. And I don't know if you ever saw it, but years ago, man, I was younger. I saw this movie called Dust to Glory, and I want to go to Baja. And it was like, he goes, do you know anything about that? I said, yeah, I do. And we finally found out I was involved with it. But he actually came down to Nora with us last year and is going to probably come race with us next year, I think, in a Razor. But again, you're sitting there going, this is 20 years after the film's released, and it's still impacting people you don't even understand. There's so many people. So, like I said, the Dust to Glory, what came out of the back end is a super proud moment in my career. It really is, because again, it's all about. It's not a one and done thing that you kind of do social media videos now, and they're kind of in and out. You don't there's no lasting value to them. But Dust to Glory has lasting value, and that's I'm proud of that.
Awesome. So then let's talk about your executive producer for Baja Social Club. And I've heard this mentioned but I've not seen much of it, and I don't know much about the project. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, if Dust to Glory has the pride upside, the Baja Social Club doesn't. There was a line in the film Dust to Glory where Vic Wilson says, if we made more history, we would have paid more attention. And I thought, you know what? He's right. And the thing that Dust to Glory didn't do was really kind of see how this all formed with these great, colorful characters like Bruce Myers, Malcolm Smith. And obviously, when I had done all the work on the 1,000 Miles to Glory history book, I had, immersed myself in off-road racing history and wrote the book. So right around the time Nora started, I felt like I should try to do this project on my own. Came up with a name which I loved. But through a series of not so good things, it never really got made. The only real upside and it still may get made. I have another potential to work with somebody to actually do it, because we went out and shot a bunch of great Nora stories, including in 2014. It was Bruce Meyer's, I think it was the 50th anniversary of Meyer's Manx. I think it was. And anyway, he had never finished a race before. Like, he had entered all these races but never finished one. And we had built him a car in 2003 and never finished. And so I took that car, worked on it through a lot of contributions and help from a lot of people in the off-road industry, and went down in 2014, and we actually finished a race in a Myers Manx with Bruce driving across the finish line. And all that is stuff that's sitting in the can. But the bigger thing was, when you mentioned Wide World of Sports, well, when I wrote my book, there's a picture of Jim McKay, who was, as you know, was the famous, anchor at the time, and he's interviewing Bruce Myers. But that interview is not in the cut that Bruce Brown gave to Wide World of Sports. So as I got to know Bruce Brown better, I said, hey, do you have outtake stuff? And he said, why don't you come up to the house? So I went to his house north of Santa Barbara, and in Bruce Brown fashion, he's sitting there smoking a cigarette in the house, and said, yeah, let's go look. And so he opens up this massive closet, and inside the closet are stacks and stacks of film canisters that are labeled on any Sunday, on any Sunday, on any Sunday, endless summer, endless summer. I mean, the archive is sitting there, and right in the bottom corner it says 68 Mexican 1000. So I pulled the canisters out, and they were full of, you can always tell when the film was good. It didn't smell. It was like still fresh 16 millimeter film and audio tracks. So I worked out a situation where I bought the rights to those, had had them all digitized essentially, and I'm still sitting on that archive with stuff that nobody's ever seen before. And in fact, found the interview with Bruce Myers and found the audio track with Bruce Myers and synced those up, and we even have nobody's ever seen it before. We're just kind of, my partner James Masters and I are just kind of waiting. So there may be an opportunity to finish that, but I just thought that era, that counterculture, 1960s, when everybody was kind of more involved with the hippie movement, then these guys are down in Baja doing their thing, and something that's still lasting. It's just it's a fascinating history, and it's fascinating people, and we have a lot of archive content that we need to assemble, but it needs to be in the right format and seen by the right people. Just for putting something together doesn't interest me. It needs to be seen, or
right.
That's I can probably do a bunch of cool vignettes and post them on YouTube, but I'm not necessarily structured that way, so we'll see.
I hope it gets made.
Thank you.
I hope it gets made.
Too. I hope so too.
If it's going to that point, and I'd love to help push it forward. I think that's anything that we can do. I mean, I'm not an editor. I don't, I'm not that kind of stuff, but I can, I got my hands in other parts of the off-road industry. So, that's.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think that the idea of what we all created, and we had a great response to the trailers we posted. I mean, we did. And we tried to go back down in 2018 a second time and ran into some rights issues that we couldn't quite fix in time. But I haven't given up on that. I tend not to ever give up on anything, which is probably my downfall. But I just, it's still so good. And like I said, it's more of how do you package this up to get it onto either a network. I mean, that's all the problem now is, monetizing these projects. I mean, that's the nuts and bolts of it. But in certain cases, like on the Drive to Survive on Netflix, I mean, it's paying off in big dividends, but you have to get to that point. So
right.
It's a chicken and egg problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's discuss the book, 1,000 Miles to Glory. That came out of being down there, working on the Baja 2000 in 2000, and the research that you did there was incredible.
Well, yeah, that was another one. I knew what I wanted to do. I had gotten some support, as I always have. I've been with the BF Goodrich brand since I started racing in 1990. And, we're still, carrying the colors, but, was able to talk to them about the most important piece, again, is monetizing it to some level. And I had a publisher interested in it, and the best publisher at the time, David Will Publishing, he's passed away now. But the idea of this Baja history book, but luckily BF Goodrich, bought, I believe it was like 1,000 or 1,500 copies up front, or made a commitment to do that, so that we could go ahead and move forward with the design and the printing and all the stuff. And it was a different time back then. But I was also fortunate enough to have done a project with Jim Ryan and had access to the hot rod archives, which nobody had. And to go into that archive and find all that great black and white imagery, which was key on those early days. I mean, they had the best photographers down there shooting from like all the NORA races from like 67 to 72, and also some Stardust 711, some Mint stuff. But we had access to 2.25 beautifully shot black and white film, and that was really what got me excited. That got me excited. But then I went to Sal Fish and said, okay, well, where's all your archives? There wasn't any. There wasn't a place that had all of the so the hardest part of the book was the back part of the book, where you have all the years, the dates, the mileages, the winners, their names, the vehicles, the times. All that was really what I started with, and then worked backwards from there to kind of understand. And I try to write it in a way, Rich, that had a storyline to every year. It wasn't just a dry, blow by blow play. I was trying to bring in storylines certain times when, whether there's the McMillan story or Toyota, when certain things would happen, and also give some backdrop to the off-road motorsports scene or whatever was happening at the time. And it was also, I think it was 4 years by the time it also got released in 2005. So no, it was 5 years almost. Took a long time. My publisher was angry at me because it took so long, but nothing like that existed, and nothing like that was in writing. So it was a labor of love, and look at it now, and again, look at it, and for the most part, I would keep it pretty much the same. There's some things I would change, but it's sold out now. You can't find them anymore, and but that was also helped a lot into the role into obviously the Dirt Sports magazine. I mean, a lot of that research helped kind of craft that too.
Right, and then on the book front, you've also done the Big Blue M, the history of McMillan racing. Is that correct?
I did. Yes, I did. Was basically a phone call. I had was between projects, and Mark McMillan called me from the beach in Cabo. You can imagine if you know Mark.
Yeah.
He's like, I want to do a family history book, and can you find somebody for me? I said, well, why don't I do it? So that evolved into, that was a massive one. That one took some brain cells for me, I think, when the time was done, 538 pages, whatever that is. But it was amazing on one hand, because when I went to do the project, Mark is absolutely has all the family history. And he had his assistant at the time set aside, and this is the great story, like 328 manila envelopes that had all the different races and the dusty times from that race, and the race notes and the pit notes were all organized.
Wow.
Okay? So you're sitting there and you're going, this is awesome. Then you're going, well, this isn't awesome. This is a lot to go through. And it was started originally about the same size of my book in terms of length, but as soon as I got into it, it got way bigger. And it took a while. And and Mark, he's very task oriented. Sometimes the creative process is different, but we were able to kind of work through it. But I remember I got married, and a year later I went on my honeymoon, and I'm looking down, I'm trying hard to get this book finished so we can have a copy by Christmas. And I remember working for weeks and weeks, all night long. And then finally, the day we're supposed to leave our honeymoon, my wife and I are going to Whistler, and she looks down and she sees about 12 manila envelopes sitting there. She goes, "Oh my God, you're not finished." I'm like, "No." So she made me load up the manila envelopes in this horrible, Trader Joe's bag, take it on the airport planes, and I literally set up a desk in our where we were staying at the Whistler, and I worked about half my honeymoon. But yeah, we got it done. But that was I'm proud of that project. It was never really intended to be something that people would buy or read, except for the McMillans and their sponsors or their team people. But it's not necessarily a reading book, but it is an insanely comprehensive reference book, that's for sure.
Nice. you made mention about if we knew we were making history, we would have, you know,
Paid more attention.
yes, exactly. Um, I can say that I'm guilty of that with the rock crawling. I never thought about it, and did not keep really good records on, who won events and that kind of stuff. I know that there's drivers out there that have been to all the events back in the day that have that information, that the programs that we put out and all that kind of stuff at the time. And George Waitson, when you hear this, know that I'm going to come for your all your data that you have saved up, and I want to copy it all out. But that's that's it's important to have that stuff, and not having it, I just kick myself.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and I'm actually working on an off-road consulting project now, and kind of started digging a bit through the dirt sports archives, and I am fascinated by all the stuff we actually did, but all the history that we wrote, and short course, rock crawling, desert, and the interviews we did, and some. I mean, it's really valuable to look back, and if you're trying to look at history, it's a huge help.
Absolutely. So let's talk about dirt sports. How did that all come about with Ryan?
Yeah, so I had helped. I was always really bullish on the off-road racing space, and again, it's just one of those things that I had in my heart, and I had worked with still work with Paul Fanner from Racer. Paul, Racer Magazine was always this crowning jewel publication. And, we'd been friends since 1992 when I started at the Russell Racing School. That was the same year Paul started Racer. And I just thought, God, I'd love to have a magazine like that someday. Or this is what the sport needs, is something that's definitive, that's colorful, that's technical. Because it was all about, it was kind of weaved in and out of like four-wheeler and off-road. Well, was a different space. And I had worked with Jim on a couple of projects for inserts, motorsports inserts for four-wheeler. He was part of our project with the Gross. We built a truck for that. And I when he wanted to kind of peel off and go to Vanstar with this concept that he had, if the conversation was, can there be enough content to do a monthly magazine? I'm like, yeah, way more than you think. And so, we kind of got together and kind of got part of that group. And, I kind of took that over in terms of the marketing, but also the content in a lot of ways. And, was able to do what we needed to do and bring in, Boyd Janes to do the Masterpiece in Metal stuff. That was a direct takeoff of what Paul was doing with his in-studio stuff. And, I think that was a key, but I think there was just a lot of activity at that time. And, the founding of, was Dust to Glory was just coming out, 5, that was all part of it, and the book. And then, Champ or the Championship Off-Road Series was blooming, and Score was, this is before 2008. So there was all kinds of activity. And if you look back, and like I said, rock crawling was, on board too with, the UROC guys, and it was just at a very high level, and we just felt like we had an amazing amount of creativity and space. Probably overcommitted in a lot of ways because I was way too perfectionist, and but we also were, we weren't just writing about it. We were doing it. We were building project cars. We were doing big tech pieces. We were racing at the time at some races with our cars that we built and pre-runners, and that takes a lot. But I think it really moved the needle at that time.
Agreed. And I hated to see the downfall of it.
Yeah, me too. I have some regrets on how it kind of all ended, but I will say that, I saw the end of kind of the monthly thing coming, the newsstand thing. I wanted to go a different direction with it, to make it more of something that came out once in a while, that was printed on better paper, that was more subscription based, because some of the photography shot was amazing, but the magazine printing didn't show that necessarily.
Right.
I mean, it's coffee table book photography level stuff, especially when you're dealing with guys like Boyd and Jason Zandrowski later on, and Brian Bank. Those guys all kind of evolved out of that. But Yeah, it was a shame. It was a shame. And then it kind of got watered down. Now the brand got watered down. And we were so protective of whatever we built, whatever we wrote about had to be the best that we could afford to do. And, I guess it's out there somewhere now, but like I said, you look back on it and you can look back on those issues and be like, man, there was some great stuff here. Great, great stuff.
And out of all those issues and all those stories, what's the one that you're the most proud of? Can you pinpoint one?
Yeah, in fact, a couple of them. One was a story that I talked about yesterday at a memorial service I did for Robbie Pierce, and it was a story that when he started trophy truck racing, he was involved with a guy named Bill Barnes. And I remember the story that I did about the old guys going off-road racing. I thought, in the way they were, I thought that story is one of our best. I remember a couple issues, the Baja 1000 commemorative one that was the biggest one we ever did. The rebranding issue that we did, and which was the 40th anniversary of the Crandon's cover. But the biggest story I do remember is covering kind of the death and the trial of Mike Goodwin with Mickey Thompson. That one was more journalistic. And then I unfortunately can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was a famous stuntman that bought a Rolls Royce that was at all the off-road races. And, he committed suicide, and I was the only one who really wrote about that. It was a sad story to write, but there's some areas of that are very, kind of more digging down even deeper. And I think those got kind of the highlight stories for me.
Right. And let's talk about Bruce Myers and the Myers-Manx, a little more detail on that and how that relationship, I'm assuming that came through Bosch.
No, it didn't.
Okay.
My dad we had an old Myers-Manx knockoff when I was a kid. So I first started driving when I was 9 years old, and it was a fiberglass dune buggy. But at the time in Pacifica, you could go up in the hills anytime you wanted.
Right.
So we were going up there, and that obviously struck a chord with me. But no, I really met Bruce Myers really in 2000, right when I was doing the event at the Peterson. I wanted Old Red there, and I got to know he and Winnie. And then right after that, was when he kind of was re-establishing his business, and he invented and launched the Myers-Manxter, which was a fiberglass dune buggy on a full-size pan. I helped him launch that with some media stuff that I was working on for him just as a favor. And, that evolved to, well, Bruce, I need a body. Let me build what I always envisioned, which I went and had a fabricator at the time help me put a lift kit on it. And because all the Myers-Manxers were really small. I'm 6'1", so I never fit in one really. So so we did that, and Bruce came by and said, "Oh man, look at this. Let me put that lift kit into the fiberglass, and we'll come out with a dual sport." And so he built the first one, I built the second one, which I still have. And our relationship just evolved to over that time, and then we built the Baja race car based on our BFG team with the Groffs, and we got together and built him a car so he could race again, and it just evolved from there. And we were close friends for many years. I brought him down to the 2000 with his original Myers-Manx, and he chased the whole race with it. So we did a lot of interactive things like that. Just was a Bruce Myers fan, and loved his whole beach Volkswagen lifestyle, surfing thing. That his whole life story is a whole other part of the world. But to bring him down with Vic Wilson and at the NOR race in 2013 was a super big part of what I wanted to do. And then in 14, going back down and having him finish a race, that was awesome. And then like I said, we had been friends and were friends for a long time until he died, unfortunately.
Right. And you mentioned that you still have that Myers-Manx. I got to ask, how many cars do you own right now?
Well, let's see. In the direct family here, my wife and I, we own 3, and then I have partial owner with my teammates of 5 more off-road cars, race cars.
Okay.
So so we have the cars we race at Dora, and then I just bought a vintage short course car that won Crandon World Championships. That was an Art Schmidt car, because we're going to be vintage racing at Crandon here soon in June.
Nice.
So I wanted to have the car. It was a turnkey car, really cool. Looks cool, rabbit motor in it. I mean, it's cool. And it was a turnkey. I can just get this and keep it there. So whenever I'm back in Crandon, I want to burn some laps, I can just do it. But yeah, but the Myers Manx was a special car. It's everybody's kind of favorite. It's because of whatever. It's just bright yellow and it looks right. We spent a lot of time building it, and it's been in magazines everywhere as a cover car for Hot VWs, and it's just kind of our signature car. My wife and I have taken long trips with it through California, and it's just a great car. It's that one we're going to keep forever. That one's not going to be sold ever.
Awesome. So besides that car, what's the car you wish you had? Still.
It goes down to two. I wish I had so in 2002, when we got the BF Goodrich Toyota program together with the Groffs, and we built a Jimco Class 1 car with a Toyota Camry V6 motor, and the same motor Bob Gordon had, and with a 5-speed Fortin. That car, in terms of balance, in terms of 300 and whatever horsepower, was just enough, right? Before you got to the big 500, 600 horsepower cars. That car was the most fun race car I ever drove by far. But the car I probably still wish I had, during the Dirt Sports days, I built an Alumacraft 4-seater with a big Chevy motor in it and a big 5-speed. That car was a hot rod. It was a Porsche, and everything you wanted in an off-road car. It was comfortable. It was fast as hell. And it was just a fun car to have. But it ended up with being so high end for me that it kind of owned me. Every time I took it out, I was worried if I heard a bang in the gearbox that I'd lost the gearbox, or an axle. And those things were, it took away some of the fun from it. So it was just like, this car is owning me. I don't really own it. Like the Manx, I don't worry about it. I can fix anything or buy anything. So, it's still out. That car is still out there somewhere. But yeah, those are the two cars I wish. And certainly the Jimco was by far my favorite race car that I ever had.
Excellent.
Or was involved in.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. And when you look back on what you've done up to this date, what is the one thing that you're probably the most proud of? I know you have, this list is incredibly long, and you should be proud of everything, but there's got to be one thing that just goes, yeah, this is it. This is why I was put on earth to do.
I honestly, I think I'm living it right now. I think, being the promoter of Crandon and taking that wonderful facility and its long history and really kind of polishing the diamond over the last 8 years to where it is now, working with the Flannery family, being in the Midwest, seeing what we've created in terms of this motorsports icon now and this cultural thing. I honestly, I think that I'm proud of, because it was also kind of just the vision I had for it. And the Flannerys basically let me just do what I thought I should do. And they believed in what we were doing and investing in it. And the racers did, and Red Bull did, and Polaris did. And I think as a culture, as a career defining, I'm going to be proud of that. I think Crandon is at the very top. I also think the other thing, Rich, I think just exposing so many people to what we do, and whether it's IndyCar guys or just guys on the street through the Wide Open program and coming racing with us, I think that I'm really proud of that. And then honestly, the singular moment, no doubt, was getting inducted to the Offroad Motorsports Hall of Fame. Somebody submitted a proposal for me. I didn't really expect it, and I certainly didn't expect to feel like I did that night. I mean, I said that night, I wish I was being inducted as a racer and not necessarily as a promoter, but it still resonates a lot. Every time I think about the Hall of Fame, I think about, we're working with the Hall of Fame at Crandon to do, we announced an annex there. We're going to build a museum there for short course. All the work we're doing with them is fantastic, but it really is thinking that after all these years, like I said, I wasn't Walker Evans, I wasn't, Ivan Stewart, I wasn't Robbie, I wasn't any of these famous drivers or even necessarily corporate people, but whatever I did, whatever contribution I made was recognized that way, and that was, still resonates when I think about the fact. And every time I go to the Ormhoff dinner, I'm just super proud to be part of that exclusive, fraternity there that did so much for this whole lifestyle and sport.
Yeah, I'm a real big fan of Ormhoff, the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. I've been going to them since the induction dinner, the first one that they did at when it was at Pomona, and we've gone every year since then. I don't even remember what year that was, but it's something that's, I think it's great that everybody gets together and celebrates the history of the off-road motorsports. And I think that everybody that's involved in any aspect of off-road motorsports, whether it's motorcycles or rally, rock crawling, desert racing, short course racing, I mean, there's so many different things that I think everybody that's an enthusiast or a racer, you may never get to that place. You may never be inducted, but I think it's something that everybody should be involved with as a member or as a, going and honoring those inductees, the people that came before and have truly advanced our sport in one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these people, have devoted their lives to this, and Robbie Pierce, said, outside of friends and family, the thing that defines us the most is what we do in this lifestyle or in this sport. It's the one thing we'll always think about. If the end of your life was tomorrow, you'd think about friends and family, and then you'd think about all that you did, in off-road racing or off-road. It's that powerful, and it matters, as Robbie said. And I
Yes.
think, I think you have to look back on people who've sacrificed and, volunteered or, given on so much of themselves to this, to perpetuate this, this crazy drug that we're all addicted to. But, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's important, and it's important to have a focal point for the whole industry and for the whole movement, as it were, because, it also justifies it to people like at Ford and to people like, there's a Hall of Fame of this is a legitimate thing. And, they've done a tremendous job. I remember going to my first Hall of Fame dinners, and they were in Reno, and there were 40 people there. And it was like, wow, this is just, and then when we finally convinced them to kind of bring it to Pomona's Off-Road Expo, which was part of the Band Star at that time, that's when I really started seeing a lot more pickup. And you had the industry there that could go and support it. And clearly bringing it to Las Vegas as part of the SEMA show has really added to it. And they've done a tremendous job with it. They're wonderful people, but they're really advancing things, and it's really great to see.
I agree wholeheartally. So anybody listening, get involved with the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. If you know somebody that you feel that deserves the recognition, get them, fill out the proposal to get them inducted. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do to become inducted, but it's the people that are out there and in are justifiably in, and there's plenty more that eventually will be in. So get involved, please. So the last thing, what would be your life motto?
My life motto really gets down to, I really think that it's almost going back to the Mark McMillan motto of, never ever give up. This life is complicated, and you have to have a lot of patience, and you have to, kind of never give up on relationships you have with people you meet now, or people you're going to be doing business with potentially in 5, 10, 15 years when the time is right. It's all about patience and timing. But, I just feel like, even to my detriment sometimes, and my poor wife's detriment, I just don't give up. You start something, you got to finish it. And it really goes back to what I think about this whole industry, Rich. If anybody ever wants to understand how this life really works, go get a book called Cowboy Ethics and read about the code of the West and how you ride for the brand, and you just never give up. And I just think that my philosophy is based on that. And I think the long-term beauty of this whole thing that we love so much is based on kind of some old-fashioned values. and that's one of them. And that's how I kind of live my life now, is based on those things. And it seems a little old fashioned, but you know what? It actually still seems to work. So that's what I can offer for that.
Awesome. I think that's a good segue for saying thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Rich. It's been nice to sit here and have a nice conversation, bring up some great old memories, and talk about the past. And like I said, I think you're doing a great job with the show, and I'm looking forward to hearing it and hearing a lot more stories from other people.
Excellent. And again, thank you. Well, that's another episode of Conversations with Big Rich. I'd like to thank you all for listening. If you could do us a favor and leave us a review on any podcast service that you happen to be listening on, or send us an email or a text message or a Facebook message, and let me know any ideas that you have, or if there's anybody that you have that you think would be a great guest, please forward the contact information to me so that we can try to get them on. And always remember, live life to the fullest. Enjoying life is a must. Follow your dreams and live life with all the gusto you can. Thank you.